If you want to know what the pictures are in the back of the bedroom here, it's my brother's house. I'm at my brother's house. So I'm spending a couple days here. We were supposed to have a 4th of July party last week, but that kind of got pushed back. My brother got called into work at the last minute, so so he had to push the party back a week. So we're gonna have a late 4th of July party, but that's not the real reason why I'm recording this video. But I want to get back on to my bashing of 45. Because you know how that's what I love to do. I love to bash 45, and if you eventually like the video, you could hit the like button on it and then subscribe to the channel. But the video is the cost of evangelical betrayal. The closest thing social conservatives and evangelical supporters of 45 had to a conversation stopper was when pressed about their support for a squatter who was so manifestly corrupt, cruel, mendacious, and psychologically unwell. The only simple phrase they could come up with, "Oh, but he appointed Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court thing." Yeah, that's about the only thing that he did, and that's really not good enough for any accomplishments or anything. Those two words were shorthanded for their belief that their reverential devotion to 45 would result in a great advance for their priorities and their policy agenda. And no priority was more important than the Supreme Court. 45 may be a flawed character, they argued, but at least he appointed Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. That is the case decided in in mid-June, in which the majority opinion written by Justice Gorsuch protected gay rights and the transgender individuals from workplace discrimination, basically handing the LGBTQ movement a historic victory. An employer who fires an individual merely for being gay or transgender defies the law, Gorsuch wrote for the majority in the 6-3 ruling. It was a crushing blow for the religious right people, and it must have dawned on more than a few of 45's evangelical supporters that if Hillary Clinton had won the squadrency, the outcome of the case would have been the same. The only difference is that the margin probably would have been a 7-2 vote. The Bostic case was not the only major legal setback for social conservatives and evangelical Christians. By a 5-4 margin, the Supreme Court in June, in the June Medical Services vs. Russo, delivered a significant defeat to the pro-life movement, striking down as unconstitutional as Louisiana law that could have left the state with only a single abortion clinic. This dashed the hopes of those who were counting on 45 appointees to lead the courts in overturning Roe vs. Wade. Both of 45 Supreme Court choices were in the minority. Social conservatives can point to some important religious liberty victories, but overall this term was a, was a judicial gut punch for the squatters' evangelical supporters. But Gorsuch argument has not been destroyed, but it has been substantially weakened. The GOP gives social conservatives little or nothing legislatively, and hasn't for a very long time. The conservative blogger Rod Dreher had told Vox's Jane Couston, "True, they have blocked some bad things over the years, but that's nothing. But I think we've always known that judges are the real deal here." Every institution, the media, academia, corporations, and others are against us on gay and transgender rights, and GOP lawmakers are gutless. The only hope we had was that federal judges would protect the status quo, and now that's gone. Legislatively, 45, compared with other squatters, has not achieved all that much for the pro-life cause and religious liberties protection. For example, George W. Bush's pro-life record is stronger, and Bill Clinton achieved more in the area of religious liberty, signing into law the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act. 45 has done a fair amount administratively for the pro-life cause. 45 has also achieved next to nothing in terms of of enacting the education reforms. Elsewhere, 45 has engaged in a bromance with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, the worst persecutor of Christians in the world. Or the worst persecutor, basically, of Christians in the world, and established more intimate and admiring relationships with many of the world's despots than with the leaders of America's traditional allies on issues that have traditionally concerned conservative evangelicals, such as fiscal responsibility and limited government. 45 has been awful. The deficit and the debt exploded under his watch, even before the pandemic even hit. Based strictly on the standard of advancing causes that the conservative evangelicals most care about. A fair-minded assessment of the 45 record is that some important things were achieved, especially in appointing federal judges. That clearly would not have happened in a Hillary Clinton squadancy, but in virtually every other area, including the outcome of several key Supreme Court decisions. 45 has fallen short of the so-called promises and expectations he claimed he was going to deliver on. Now think about what the cost has been of the uncritical support given to 45 by evangelical Christians. For now, focus just on this. Christians who are supporters of the squatter who have braided themselves to a man who, in just the past few days and weeks, tweeted a video of a supporter shouting white power. He later deleted the tweet, but has yet to denounce it. He attacked NASCAR's only black driver, Bubba Wallace, while also criticizing the decision by NASCAR to ban the Confederate flags from its races. Threatened to veto this year's annual defense bill if an amendment is included that would require the Pentagon to change the names of bases honoring Confederate military leaders. He referred to the COVID-19 as Kung Flu during a Klan speech at a church in Phoenix, and blessed the two sports teams, the Washington Redskins included, Indians, who are considering name changes because of concerns by supporters of those franchises that those team names give undue offense. These provocations by the squatter aren't anomalous. He's a man who vaulted to political prominence by peddling a racist conspiracy theory that Barack Obama wasn't born in the United States. He later implied that Obama was a secret Muslim and dubbed him the founder of ISIS, and whose remarks about an Indian-born judge with Mexican heritage was described by former House Speaker Paul Ryan as the textbook definition of a racist comment. The white supremacist Richard Spencer, describing the neo-Nazi and white supremacist march in Charlottesville, Virginia, told The Atlantic there was no question that Charlottesville wouldn't have occurred without 45. It really was because of his campaign and this new potential for a nationalist candidate who was resonating with the public in every intense way. The alt-right found something in 45. He changed the paradigm and made this kind of public presence of the alt-right possible. And David Duke, the former Ku Klux Klan leader, called the march a turning point for his own movement, which seeks to fulfill the promises of 45. For his whole life before and since becoming squatter, 45 has exploited racial divisions and appealed to the racial resentments. The squatter is now doing so more and not less than in the past, despite the fact, and probably because of the fact, that America is in the grips of a pandemic that he and his administration have badly bungled, that has now claimed the lives of more than 130,000 American lives to date. As the New York Times' Maggie Haberman pointed out on July 6, almost every day in the last 2 weeks, 45 has sought to stoke white fear and resentment. White evangelicals are the core of 45's political support, and while the overwhelming number of the squatters' evangelical supporters may not be racist, they are willing to back a man who openly attempts to divide people by race. That would be enough of an indictment, but the situation is actually a good deal worse than that, since 45's eagerness to inflame and ugly passions is only one thread of his depraved moral tapestry. My hunch is at the beginning of this Faustian bargain, most evangelicals didn't imagine it would come to this, but them defending the indefensible, tarnishing their reputations, and doing incalculable damage to their causes. This is the worst year for America in more than a half a century. A stunning 87% of Americans are dissatisfied with the way things are going, and only 17% feel proud when thinking about the state of the nation, while 71% feel angry and 66% are fearful. 45's squadancy is so polarizing and such a catastrophe that a plurality or outright majority of Americans now oppose much of whatever he supports. The mood of the public is the most progressive it has been in nearly 70 years. During the 45 era, the nation has moved to the left on a whole series of issues, including those that matter most to evangelical 45 nutlickers. The 45 squadancy, which has produced a few significant legislative or governing achievements, has inflicted gaping wounds on the Repug Party, conservative causes, and the evangelical movement. In his marvelous book, The Narnian, The Life and Imagination of C.S. Lewis, Alan Jacobs tells about the theater critic and the essay writer Kenneth Tynan, who after reading Lewis's The Hideous Strength said how thrilling he makes goodness seem, how tangible and radiant, and extra Lewis was a tutor to Tynan, who was not himself a believer. Tynan perceived something essential about Lewis. One of his most impressive qualities was his ability to present the good life, and his Christian faith, which shaped his understanding of the good, as tangible and radiant, a thrilling and captivating journey, a way to find joy and fulfillment. That was hardly the whole story. Lewis faced a crisis in faith late in his life when he was overwhelmed by grief after his wife, Joy Davidman, died of cancer, a crisis he recovered from, but that left a mark on him. But still, because of his faith, Lewis's life was more alluring, more captivating, more vivifying. It was said of Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien that they never lost their enchantment with the world. The greatest cost of the 45 years to evangelical Christianity isn't in the political sphere, but rather in what Christians refer to as bearing witness, showing how their lives have been transformed by their faith. Much of the evangelical movement in aligning itself with 45 has shown itself to be graceless and joyless, seized by fear, hypocritical, censorious, and filled with grievances. That is not true of all evangelicals, of course, and it's not true of all evangelicals who are 45 nutlookers, but it's true enough of them, and certainly of the political leadership of the white evangelical movement, to have done deep inquiry into their public witness. I know this firsthand from pastors because around the country who have talked about the catastrophic effects of the unholy alliance between evangelicals and 45. One pastor of a large church on the Pacific Coast told me that there are many reasons why young people are turning away from the church, but my observation is this. 45 has vastly accelerated that trend. He's put it into hyperdrive. This pastor, who's a lifelong repug who declined to be quoted by name because of the position he occupies, wrote that for decades Hollywood has portrayed conservative Christians as cruel, ignorant, greedy, and hypocritical, because most of them are. For 20 years I have worked, led, and sacrificed to put that lie to that stereotype, and have done so successfully here because of how we all served the least of the least, city officials, school officials, and many atheists who have formed a respect for Jesus and his church, and I'm watching all that get washed away. He added, yes, Hollywood and the media created a decidedly unattractive stereotype of Christians, and 45 fits it perfectly. He's made it all seem true, and sadly I now realize that stereotype is more true than I ever knew. It breaks my heart in valuable terms. Hollywood did the set, but 45 was the spike that drove the ball home. He's everything I've been trying to say isn't what the church is about, but sadly maybe it is. In the midst of the wreckage, 45's evangelical supporters will undoubtedly comfort themselves with this thought, but we got Gorsuch, and that's all, basically.